Hello and welcome back to I Completed 80s Music. I'm the 80s Mixtaper and consider me your musical maestro for this end-to-end tour of all the biggest, best and most bonkers songs of the 80s, one song at a time. For anyone new to the pod, firstly welcome. Here's a little summary to bring you up to date. Back in 2016, I made a bet with myself that I could listen to every single charting entry from the 31st of December 1979 to the 31st of December 1989. With a little help from the streaming services, a lot of Madonna, Spandau Ballet and Guns N' Roses later, and by 2021 I'd done it. This pod is the journey, the story of the best, most diverse decade in music, the bands, the stories, the breakups, the makeups, and everything in between, plus my own personal memories, as the 80s were the decade when I was a kid, from 18 months to 11 years old. And to that, we need to talk about childhood for a second, as there was a very distinct theme in the comments section this week. As you know, we love your corrections, recollections, and other 80s related stuff, and this week TikTok lit up with comments about two songs in particular. Firstly, the video for Dennis Waterman's I Could Be So Good For You blew up. We had over 65,000 views for the video, and so many wonderful heartfelt comments, a lot with a very similar theme. I usually only read out 2 or 3 comments, but this one clearly hit home, and so I'm going to read out my favourites. Mark CC176 said Minder was just as good as Only Fools, but doesn't get the same recognition. Stan24598 says, what a TV series, gold. Miss Sparkles 14 used to watch with my dad, and Brushstrokes and The Bill. Noodle1251 used to be allowed to stay up with my nan to watch Minder. User 548230418655015 had this record and never missed an episode, and Dennis was absolutely brilliant. Tiny Crazy Cool says, reminds me of when we all watched the same telly on a Saturday night. Happy times. www.2021irish says, sitting there trying to keep my eyes open because my parents were telling me it's time for bed. Darren949, best TV theme tune of all time. Louise Robbins 7, Robbie Williams sang this last week in Bath. I love singing along. Gatland 1977, Thursday nights 9 p.m. Come on up to bed, kids. And then Sarah Bear 342, when I heard this, it was time for bed. Firstly, amazing to hear Robbie Williams sang it in his recent concerts, keeping the flame alive. Secondly, I just love that so many of us who are now in our mid-40s and can do anything or go anywhere all still remember that when Minder came on, it was bedtime. Even if it was daylight still, getting marched up the wooden hill to my bedroom and hearing Arthur Daly's Indoors voice coming floating up the stairs. That illicit time after 9 p.m, that magical hour when adult parent things happened. As for being in the same realm as Only Fools, absolutely. Looking back on it now, the 80s were littered with great comedy. Hello, Hello, Yes Minister, Last of the Summer Wine. Great memories, and it's so lovely to hear from you all. The second set of comments came for Japan's Gentlemen Take Polaroids, again on TikTok. Peach Lil 0 says, absolutely prolific. I still listen now, and as I've gotten older, the appreciation has just increased. And KevB1927 says, saw Japan in Bristol circa 1983. Listened to Oil on Canvas today. Gone but never forgotten. And I agree, prolific is about right. I still stand by the point that of all the bands which come from synth pop, new wave and new romantic, they all owe Japan a debt for both their style and music. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can find me on Instagram, X and TikTok as the 80s Mixtaper, or you can email in to completed80s@aol.com. So what's on today's show? Well, we've reached that point, that magical point in April 1981, when the whole of the nation swooned for rip-off Velcro skirts. Yes, we'll be introducing Bucks Fizz to the mix. We get Dire Straits, The Cure and Spandau Ballet continuing to build their burgeoning reputations, and we end with an absolute classic by REO Speedwagon amongst others. As usual, due to pesky copyright laws, we cannot play the songs on the pod. However, if you go to the episode description, you'll find links to playlist 22 for both Spotify and Apple Music, plus a full track listing should those links fail, so you can play along at home. And with that in mind, let's get into the first half of Playlist 22 and April 1981. So for track 1 today, if you lived in the UK in 1981 and were a kid or an adult, there was no more pleasing gimmick than two quite attractive women having their long skirts ripped off to reveal some slightly shorter skirts. I think it was what one might call something for the dads, but the drama of it appealed to everyone. By Eurovision, Making Your Mind Up by Bucks Fizz is blasting out of every radio in Britain, a 3-minute burst of pure pop adrenaline. This is the UK's 4th Eurovision win, and trust me when I say there won't be many more. A single that sold 4 million copies and turned a Velcro skirt rip into a national obsession. We start today, of course, by diving into the sugary, kinetic moment when Bucks Fizz grabbed the Eurovision crown in Dublin and shot to number 1. Let's talk about the song, the band's lightning-fast formation, and their wild ride to the RDS Simmons Court stage. This is track 1, playlist 22. Bucks Fizz didn't exist until January 1981. They were a pop experiment built from scratch to contend at Eurovision. Songwriter Andy Hill and his partner Nicola Martin, a sharp music industry player, crafted Making Your Mind Up specifically for the contest. Martin knew the stakes. She'd sung for Coco in 1978, a UK Eurovision entry that tanked at 11th place. She wasn't here to lose again. First pick was Cheryl Baker, a Coco veteran with a voice that could cut through a storm and a stage presence to match. Mike Nolan, a Dublin-born singer with a clean-cut vibe, joined next. Then came Bobby G, a former builder from Epsom who'd barely sung professionally but had the blonde hair and easy charm they wanted. Jay Aston, a 19-year-old from Surrey with a theatre background, completed the lineup. Formed in January, they had weeks to become a band before the UK's national final, A Song for Europe. So they were less a group, more a high-stakes science project. The song, a relentless pop machine. Andy Hill's lyrics, paired with John Danter's music, are simple but get the job done. You got to speed it up, and then you got to slow it down. Because if you believe a love that can hit the top, you've got to play around. But the lyrics are just the scaffolding for the real draw, a melody that hooks you in like a fish, all bright piano stabs and clap-along energy. The real genius, though, was the performance. The choreography, with Bobby G and Mike Nolan yanking off Cheryl and Jay's long skirts to reveal miniskirts, was a calculated stunt. It wasn't subtle, but it was unforgettable, turning Velcro into a pop culture footnote overnight. On March the 11th, 1981, Bucks Fizz brought Making Your Mind Up to A Song for Europe, facing stiff competition. They didn't just win, they dominated, earning their spot in Dublin. The single, released by RCA Records in late March, debuted at number 24 on the UK singles chart on March the 28th. Atop of the Pop's performance sent it soaring to number 5 the next week. RCA, initially sceptical, smelled a hit and rushed an album into production before the Eurovision final. April the 4th, 1981, Dublin, the 26th Eurovision Song Contest. Bucks Fizz performed 14th, sandwiched between Norway and Portugal. The contest was brutal. 5 songs swapped the lead as the votes trickled in. Early rounds looked grim, but Bucks Fizz pulled ahead, clinching 136 points, edging out Germany's Lena Valatis by 4 points. The skirt rip, backed by John Coleman's live orchestra, sealed it. A moment so electric, it reportedly sparked a UK Velcro shortage within days, and that is the God-honest truth. Post-win, Making Your Mind Up hit number 1 in the UK on April the 18th, 1981, holding the top spot for 3 weeks. It also ruled the charts in 8 countries, including Ireland, and went top 10 in 7 others, moving 4 million units globally. Some critics sneered, calling the vocals shaky and the group a triumph of style over substance. Fans didn't care. The song's raw energy and that cheeky skirt trick made it a phenomenon, later voted the UK's best Eurovision entry by BBC Radio 2 listeners in 2013. Cheryl Baker later admitted it wasn't their finest work, but it was the launch pad for a string of hits. Bucks Fizz weren't just Eurovision champs, they were a pop force, ready to outlast the one-hit wonder label. Talking of one-hit wonders, for track 2, we move into post-punk. Department S steps up with Is Vic There? A single that's all sharp angles and shadowy vibes, a 3-minute jolt from a band that sparked once, grazed the charts and vanished. But you know what? I like this song, so it's included. This is our only dive into their world. Here's the deal on the band, their one hit, and the strange fleeting moment they owned. Department S formed in 1979, a 5-piece named after a 60s spy show that was more camp than cool. Vaughn Toulouse, yes, that's his name, fronted them, his voice a mix of menace and nonchalance. Mike Herbage's guitars cut like switchblades, Tony Lordan's bass proud low, Stuart Mizon's drums snapped tight, and Eddie Roxer, later Mark Taylor, layered on keyboards. They were punk kids, raised on the Clash's snarl, but chasing the darker pulse of Joy Division or Bauhaus's gothic drama, with a hint of dub slink. They scrapped it out in London's grimy venues, the Moonlight Club, the Lyceum, building a small devoted crowd in the post-punk scene. Their first single, Is Vic There, landed on Demon Records in December 1980, but it took until spring 81 to catch fire. Written by Herbage and Toulouse, the track's driven by Herbage's guitar, which early on prowls round corners, looking for its next victim before exploding into a continual sequence that feels like the chase is on. Toulouse's deadpan delivery hits with lines like, "The night is young, the mood is mellow, and there's music in my ears. Say, is Vic there? I hear ringing in the air, so I answer the phone. A voice comes over clear. Say, is Vic there?" It's a mood like a late night call to a ghost named Vic. The "is Vic there" hook is catchy yet eerie, like a question you're half afraid to answer. In the same way that the League of Gentlemen's Papa Lazarou would ask if Dave was there, and there clearly was no right answer, the same applies to the question of whether Vic is there. It entered the UK charts on April the 12th, 1981, hitting number 22 and sticking for 7 weeks. For an upstart post-punk band, that was enough to score a top-of-the-pop spot on April the 16th, where Toulouse's lanky frame and sly smirk stood out amongst the chart's pop gloss. The 12-inch remix, with its longer bass lines and echoey haze, found a home in clubs, spun by DJs for the black-clad crowd. The story sours from there, unfortunately. Department S signed to Stiff Records, the label behind Ian Dury and The Damned, but their follow-ups, Going Left Right, hit number 55, and I Want, a chart no-show, flopped. Their 1981 album, Substance, earned some critical nods for its moody, danceable edge, but sold like stale beer. By 82, they were done, torn apart by band drama and a scene pivoting to Culture Club's polish and Spandau Ballet's highly coiffured sheen. Toulouse kept making music until his death in 1991 at 32 from AIDS-related illness, a brutal full stop. Later reunions, led by Herbage with a new singer, leaned on old glories but couldn't reignite the flame. Is Vic There isn't some anthem blaring from every corner pub. It lingers in the margins, Spotify's retro playlists, late-night club sets, X-threads where fans reminisce about 81's weird magic. David Tickle's production keeps it lean, raw but sharp, letting the band's oddity breathe. Its tense, danceable pulse echoes in later bands like Franz Ferdinand, though Department S never got the credit. That year, the UK charts were a circus. Department S slipped in, proof that something raw and strange could still break through. It's a snapshot of a band's one shot, 3 minutes of cool cryptic swagger that doesn't overstay its welcome. They caught a moment and then let it go. Why have one hit wonder when you can have two? Next up, a single that flickered brightly but briefly, Only Crying by Keith Marshall. As mentioned, this is another one and done artist, so buckle up for a deep cut on a song that hit number 12 on the UK singles chart and then, well, mostly vanished. This is our track 3 today. Keith Marshall was born on June the 5th, 1956 in Hampstead, northwest London, a place that's less rock and roll crucible and more leafy suburb. He's a guitarist and vocalist with a knack for melody, cutting his teeth in the glam rock outfit Hello, which he joined in 1971 at the tender age of 15. Hello had some UK chart action. Their cover of The Exciters' Tell Him hit number 6, and their take on Russ Ballard's New York Groove cracked the top 10. But by 1979, Hello was fizzling out and Marshall was itching for something new. He'd already tasted solo work with a 1979 single, Remember Me, which scraped to number 40 in Germany, but the UK wasn't biting. Enter David Blaylock, Hello's old road manager, who became Marshall's champion. Blaylock launched Arrival Records, and their second release was Only Crying, a self-penned track that dropped on February the 27th, 1981. The song itself is a curious number. Clocking in at about 4 minutes, it's got this soft, shuffling beat, a lilting guitar solo, and a faint ocean wave sound in the background that almost steers this ship into yacht rock territory. Marshall's voice is earnest, not powerhouse, delivering lines like, "Ain't no big sensation, committed no crime, only recollections of forgotten old affections, lost in time, only crying." Those lyrics are simple, but sting with nostalgia. It's not Springsteen-level poetry, but it's got enough ache to stick. The production, courtesy of Blaylock's outfit, leans into a polished pop-rock vibe. Think less punky Clash and more Toto's smoother edges. Chart-wise, Only Crying was a sleeper. It hit the UK top 40 2 weeks after release and peaked at number 12 in May 1981, hanging around for 10 weeks. Not bad for a guy who'd been grinding in a glam band for a decade. It also made waves abroad, number 1 in Belgium, number 3 in Switzerland, number 5 in Germany, number 8 in Austria, and number 10 in the Netherlands. In the Flemish charts, it lounged for 13 weeks, 4 at the top spot. But here's the kicker, it was Marshall's only UK hit. Follow-up singles like Silver and Diamonds and an album both on Arrival tanked. By the mid-1980s, he was a mainland Europe darling, playing nostalgia gigs, but the UK had moved on. So why did Only Crying connect? Maybe it's the song's unassuming charm. That key change with the guitar solo feels like a warm hand on your shoulder. Or maybe it's the era. 1981 was a weird pivot point, with new wave crashing against soft rock, and this track slipped through the cracks just right. Classic Pop magazine called it likeably poignant, though they noted it lacks beef. Fair, but not every song needs to be a steak. Fans on Hit Parade rave about its gentle melody and sea sounds, one guy waxing poetic about lying on a Greek island, watching volleyball and needing a cold shower. That's the vibe, summer fling, fleeting but vivid. Marshall's story post-1981 gets hazy. He didn't rejoin Hello, which reformed under singer Bob Bradbury for nostalgia tours. He faded from the spotlight, leaving Only Crying as his calling card. The song's legacy lives in vinyl bins and YouTube, with remixes like DJ Cristobal's 2016 extended mix trying to keep it fresh. On Discogs, a 1981 7-inch can go for as little as 40 cents or as much as $5.68, depending on the day. It's not a collector's holy grail, but it's got a cult following. What's the takeaway? Only Crying is a snapshot of a guy who briefly had a hit. Marshall wasn't a one-trick pony, he'd been gigging since his teens, but the industry is a cruel beast. The song's not going to rewrite history, but it's a damn fine 4 minutes that'll make you feel 17 again, driving with the windows down, chasing a feeling you can't name, and sometimes that's enough. Next, we're back with a band we last met in episode 8.5. When we last met them, they were hitting the charts with A Forest, their first foray into success. Now they're back, a little older, and beginning to find their place in the charts. We're talking, of course, about The Cure. It's 1981 now, and The Cure are back with Primary, the lead single from their third album, Faith, released March the 27th, 1981 on Fiction Records. This is The Cure digging deeper into the gloom, but not yet the full-blown gothic cathedral they build with Pornography in 1982. Let's jump in with 2 feet and see where Robert Smith, still just 22 years old, is at his journey toward becoming the teased hair, lipstick-smeared icon we associate with goth royalty. Spoiler, he's not quite there yet, but the seeds are sprouting. This is track 4, playlist 22. Primary hit the UK singles chart at number 43, charting for 6 weeks starting April the 4th, 1981. Not a massive hit, but it's a cult classic, a song that's all about mood over melody, atmosphere over hooks. The track's defining quirk: no guitars, no keyboards, just two basses, one played by Simon Gallup, the other by Robert Smith, who slathers his with effects pedals to give it that eerie, twangy lead sound. Lol Tolhurst's drums are stark, almost militaristic, driving the song with a relentless deadpan pulse. It's sparse, claustrophobic, and raw, clocking in at 3 minutes 40 for the 7-inch version, though the 12-inch extended mix stretches to 5:56, with longer instrumental intros. That 12-inch, by the way, is a collector's item, never reissued on any album. Lyrically, Primary is cryptic but piercing. Smith sings the innocence of sleeping children dressed in white and slowly dreaming stops all time. Later, he lands on, and further we go and older we grow, the more we know, the less we show. These lines, delivered in his keening, almost alien wail, hint at lost youth, regret, and the weight of experience. Some read it as a reflection on marriage or parenthood, but Smith, barely out of his teens, was likely channeling something more abstract, maybe the disillusionment of growing up. He told Rolling Stone in 2004 that Faith was born from a dark place, with fame and drugs creeping into the band's world. The Peel Sessions version of Primary referenced primary colours, but by Faith it's stripped down to this bleak meditation, the colour imagery reduced to a fleeting mention of kids in red, yellow and blue. Compared to A Forest, Primary feels heavier, more oppressive. A Forest had a hypnotic groove, a sense of movement, even if it was towards something ominous. Primary is static, like you're trapped in a room with no windows, the walls closing in. The shift from 17 Seconds to Faith is clear. 17 Seconds was moody but delicate, with keyboards adding a ghostly shimmer. Faith leans harder into the dark, the sound more skeletal, the emotional stakes higher. The band's lineup had stabilised: Gallup on bass, Tolhurst on drums, Smith on vocals and bass, but keyboardist Matthew Hartley had split, unhappy with the suicidal sombre direction, as he told Jeff Apter in Never Enough. The absence of keyboards makes Primary feel stark, almost brutalist. Is Robert Smith the goth god yet? Not quite. His look, teased hair, eyeliner, pale face, was emerging as seen in the Primary video, with its misty shots of kids in vintage goth attire and the band in a dark studio. But Smith himself resisted the goth label. In a 2006 interview, he called it pitiful to tag The Cure as goth, insisting they were uncategorizable. His stint with Susie and the Banshees in 82 to 84 would cement the goth aesthetic, but in 81, he's still more post-punk poet than full-on Batcave deity. The Faith cover, designed by Paul Thompson, shows a foggy Bolton Priory, a Gothic church hinting at the vibe, but Smith's lyrics and delivery feel more personal, less theatrical than the grand doomed romanticism of later albums like Disintegration. The Primary video, intercutting the band with those ethereal kids, feels like a fever dream, amplifying the song's unsettling vibe. Smith's performance on Top of the Pops on April the 16th, 1981, alongside acts like The Beat and Spandau Ballet, must have looked alien. His voice, that double bass drone, the lack of any pop sheen. David Hepworth at Smash Hits admired Smith but wondered how long The Cure could lean on the same clambering bass and deadpan drums. Fair question, but they'd prove him wrong, evolving while keeping that core gloom. Primary isn't The Cure's most famous single, but it is a pivot point. It's where they shed the last of their punk roots and embrace something darker, more introspective. The Faith tour, dubbed the Picture Tour, saw them screen Carnage Visors, an instrumental film by Rick Gallup, instead of using an opening act. A bold, artsy move. Smith was so deep in the Faith persona, he'd leave gigs in tears. That intensity, that willingness to dive headfirst into despair, sets Primary apart. It's not a banger, not a sing-along, but it's The Cure laying the groundwork for the gothic legacy they'd reluctantly inherit. Alright, for track 5 we're back with Dire Straits, picking up where we left off with the aching, lovelorn sprawl of Romeo and Juliet. That was early 81 and the band was riding the wave of making movies, their third album, a record that felt like Mark Knopfler had cracked open his chest and let every vivid cinematic story spill out. Romeo and Juliet hit number 8 on the UK singles chart, a proper hit, but now we're sliding into Skate Away, the second single off that album, released in April 1981 and peaking at number 37 in the UK. It's a song that's less a chart topper and more a vibe, a 6.5-minute urban fable that captures a moment when the band was still figuring out how to dance with the new decade. Press play now. Let's set the scene. Dire Straits in 1980 were a band in transition. They'd shed Mark's brother David after some sibling friction, leaving them a trio. Mark on vocals and guitar, John Illsley on bass and Pick Withers on drums. They'd brought in Roy Bittan, Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band keyboardist, to add some texture to making movies. The album, dropped on October the 17th, 1980, hit number 4 in the UK and went double platinum. It's a record obsessed with stories, gritty, visual, almost like short films. Skate Away is the perfect example, a track that feels like you're tailing a roller skating dreamer through a city that doesn't quite know what to make of her. The song's about a girl, unnamed, who glides through the crowded streets on roller skates, headphones clamped on, tuned into a rock station, maybe with a Sony Walkman on, which had just hit the scene in '79. Mark Knopfler paints her as an urban toreador, dodging taxis and weaving through pedestrians, untouchable, lost in her own soundtrack. The lyrics are pure Knopfler, sharp and evocative. She gets rock and roll, a rock and roll station, and a rock and roll dream. She's making movies on location. She don't know what it means. It's a whole damn Polaroid stack of a girl who's both in the world and above it, her reality shaped by the music in her ears. Musically, Skate Away is a slow burn. It starts with this quiet, almost eerie fade-in, a pacey snare arrangement as you visualise the girl building up speed on those skates as the metropolis sprawls around her. Knopfler's guitar tiptoeing alongside Bittan's keys, building a groove that's loose but deliberate. The song clocks in at 6:40 on the album, though the single got chopped to 4 minutes and 45 to appease radio DJs who'd twitch at the thought of that length of playtime. Those opening seconds, that gradual swell, apparently freaked out some DJs anyway. Too much silence before the song kicked in. Knopfler's guitar work here is unmistakable. All clean lines and subtle bends, less flashy than Sultans of Swing, but just as precise. It's a track that invites you to lean in, to follow the skater's path through the streets. The music video, directed by Lester Bookbinder, was a big deal when MTV was still a newborn in '81. It starred Jayzik Azikiwe, credited as Jay Carly, daughter of Nigeria's first president, Nnamdi Azikiwe. She's roller girl, skating through London, all swagger and grace, headphones on, embodying the song's spirit. The video was part of a 3-song VHS compilation Dire Straits put out alongside Romeo and Juliet and Tunnel of Love, back when bands were starting to realise video could be as vital as vinyl. It's grainy, raw and perfectly in sync with the song's vibe, a little rough around the edges, a little defiant. What makes Skate Away stick is how it captures a specific kind of freedom. This isn't the open road rebellion of Springsteen or the punk snarl of The Clash. It's quieter, more personal, more intimate. The skater's just carving out her own space in the world, dodging cabbies and gawkers, living for the next song on the radio. Knopfler's storytelling is the engine here. He's always been a guy who can make you see his characters, whether it's the doomed lovers of Romeo and Juliet or the carnival dreamers in Tunnel of Love. In Skate Away, he gives you this girl who's both ordinary and mythic, a figure you might spot on a city corner but who feels like she's from a storybook. Chart-wise, Skate Away didn't set the world on fire. Number 37 in the UK, number 58 on the Billboard Hot 100, and number 31 on the Billboard Rock chart. But we have to look at the bigger context. Making Movies, the album, was a beast, hitting number 1 in Italy and Norway, number 19 in the US, and cementing Dire Straits as a band that could blend pub rock grit with something more expansive. Skate Away, Romeo and Juliet, and Tunnel of Love, the latter scraping number 54 in the UK. The album's title even comes from the line in Skate Away, "She's making movies on location," a nod to Knopfler's knack for turning songs into scenes. The Walkman, the roller skates, the idea of a rock station blaring through headphones, it's so tethered to that pre-digital moment, yet there's something timeless about it too. The skater could be anyone, anywhere, lost in their own playlist, moving through a world that's too busy to notice. Knopfler's voice, that half-spoken drawl on his guitar, always saying just enough, make it feel immediate, like you're skating alongside her. Ultimate Classic Rock's Michael Gallucci called it Dire Straits' 7th best song, praising its traditional rock radio format. And Radio World back in 81 said the narrative was as vivid as Knopfler's guitar is distinctive. They weren't wrong. This track also marks a pivot for Dire Straits. After making movies, they'd lean harder into the cinematic, with Love Over Gold in 82 and the mega success of Brothers in Arms in 85. But Skate Away is where you hear them stretching, figuring out how to balance their rootsy origins with something bigger, more visual. They toured the album hard, hitting Europe, North America and Oceania from October 1980 to July 1981, with new members Alan Clark on keys and Hal Linders on guitar joining post-recording. So spin Skate Away again, picture that girl, skates humming, headphones buzzing, weaving through a city that's hers for the taking. It's Dire Straits at their storytelling best, a band building a world, making movies. Track 6 today, and we're back with those new romantic newbies, Spandau Ballet. We last left those doyens of the new scene sweating bullets after The Freeze hit number 17 on the UK singles chart in January 1981. Their debut single, To Cut a Long Story Short, had stormed to number 5, and that sophomore slump fear was creeping in. Were they a one-hit wonder? Were the Blitz kids, their new romantic faithful, already drifting to the next shiny thing? Enter Musclebound, released March the 27th, 1981, as a double A-side with Glow in the UK. This is Spandau doubling down on their debut album, Journeys to Glory, trying to prove they're not just pretty boys in frilly shirts, but a band with something to say. This is track 6, playlist 22. The track itself is a departure from the sharp synth-driven punch of To Cut a Long Story Short. Produced by Richard James Burgess, who'd helmed their earlier hits, Musclebound leans into a slower, almost Viking longship drumbeat groove. It's got this hypnotic chant-like rhythm, with Tony Hadley's booming baritone front and centre, singing lines like, "We're building fires that will burn until morning, the smell of books and hot stone surrounds us. Tough is the leather that's strapped to my skin. Strong are the bonds that we make." The lyrics, penned by guitarist Gary Kemp, are cryptic, evoking some vague industrial struggle. Maybe a nod to the working class roots of these Islington lads. Maybe just a slightly S&M vibe. Steve Norman's percussion and Martin Kemp's bass throb like a heartbeat, while Gary's guitar adds these jagged edges. It's less dance floor banger, more like something you'd hear in a smoky underground club where everyone's posing harder than the statues on the Journeys to Glory cover. Speaking of that cover, Gary Kemp told New Sounds, New Styles in May 1982 that he wanted all the singles from the album to echo its aesthetic, designed by Graham Smith with inspiration from John Flaxman's neoclassical structures. The Musclebound sleeve keeps that vibe, stark, chiselled, mythological. It's as if Spandau's saying, we're the art as well as the music. But let's be real, this is still pop, and pop lives or dies by the charts. Musclebound and Glow hit number 10 on the UK singles chart, their third consecutive top 20 single. Not a smash, but solid enough to keep Chrysalis Records happy and the band's momentum rolling. It was a relief too, because Spandau were already looking over their shoulder at rivals like Duran Duran, who had dropped Planet Earth, and they were ready to steal the new romantic crown. The music video though, wow, this is where things get wild. Directed by Russell Mulcahy, who'd later helmed Duran Duran's iconic videos, the Musclebound shoot was a mess. Filmed in the Lake District, it was meant to be a one-day job with a £15,000 budget. Then a blizzard hit, costs doubled, schedules imploded. Mulcahy had the band riding horses, which sounds cool until you hear Gary Kemp got thrown off and knocked out cold. Drummer John Keeble noped out after that, refusing to remount. Tony Hadley, ever the showman, kept riding despite Mulcahy's pleas to stop as the weather worsened. Steve Norman, reflecting in 2021, noted the video's inclusion of dwarfs. Yep, you heard that right, and that wouldn't fly today, but it was of its time. The final product is this surreal snow-dusted epic with the band looking like frostbitten warriors in a Wagner opera. Tony Hadley later admitted to Dig magazine he still doesn't know what the video's about, and honestly that's part of its charm. It's ambitious, overblown and a little ridiculous, but captures Spandau's hunger to stand out. Lyrically, Musclebound doesn't give you much to grab onto. Lines like the chorus, work till you're muscle-bound all night long, gotta work till you're muscle-bound all night long, feels like a mantra for grinding it out, fitting for a band hustling to stay relevant. It lets Tony's voice carry the emotion, raw, urgent, almost theatrical. The song's not a sing-along like True would be 2 years later, but it's got this primal pull. The 7-inch version included on the 2010 Journeys to Glory reissue alongside a BBC session tape tightens the sprawl of the album cut, but even at its leanest, Musclebound feels like an expansion of the repertoire, Spandau proving they could do more than churn out synthy dance club hits. In 1981, Spandau were off the launch pad, but still not quite in the stratosphere. The new romantic scene was peaking, but it was also still fragile. Clubs like Blitz and La Beat Route was still the epicentre of cool, but the mainstream was beckoning. Spandau's first US gig happened that May at New York's Underground Club, paired with a fashion show by Axiom designers. They were also the first UK pop band to play Ibiza's Coup Club, cementing their credit as global tastemakers. Musclebound reflects that tension. It's too weird for Top of the Pops, but too polished for the punk crowd. Reviews were kind though. Critics praised its brooding physicality per dig, and the single's chart performance bought Spandau time to evolve. What's fascinating is how Musclebound foreshadows Spandau's later reinventions. The funk undertones that hint at chart number 1, their next big hit, which leaned hard into Brit funk with Beggar and Co.'s horns. The theatricality points towards the widescreen ballads of True, but in 1981 they were still figuring it out, caught between their Blitz roots and the pop stardom they craved. Musclebound isn't their best song, hell, it's not even their best from Journeys to Glory, but it's a snapshot of a band pushing boundaries, risking failure, and somehow pulling it off. It's Spandau Ballet, muscle-bound for the fray, ready to fight for their place in the 80s pantheon. Alright folks, for our last track today, buckle up because we're diving into the heart of the Midwest rock furnace that is REO Speedwagon and their game-changing single, Keep On Loving You. This is the moment the Champaign, Illinois Road Dogs finally broke through, not just as bar band heroes, but as Billboard-topping titans. Let's get into the band and the raw, complicated emotion that made this power ballad a defining hit of the early 80s. This is track 7, playlist 22. REO Speedwagon formed in 1967, born in the basement of a University of Illinois dorm where keyboardist Neil Doughty, an electrical engineering student, jammed with drummer Alan Gratzer. The name came from a truck Doughty read about in a transportation history class. REO Speedwagon, a 1915 flatbed designed by Ransom Eli Olds. By 71, they'd signed with Epic Records and dropped their self-titled debut, a scrappy hard rock record that didn't chart but showed their grit. The 70s were a grind, 8 albums, constant lineup changes, and relentless touring through Midwest dives. Early singers came and went, but Kevin Cronin, with his nasal, earnest voice, joined in 72, left briefly, and returned by 76 to become the band's frontman for good. Guitarist Gary Richrath's blistering riffs and Neil Doughty's rolling organ gave them a Rust Belt rock edge, while bassist Bruce Hall and drummer Alan Gratzer locked in the rhythm. Albums like Riding the Storm Out in 73 and You Can Tune a Piano But You Can't Tune a Fish in 1978 eventually go platinum after their success. But they were still a regional act at this point, packing St. Louis Stadium while barely registering in LA clubs. By 1980, after 9 lives flopped, Epic was ready to drop them. REO Speedwagon needed a miracle. Enter High Infidelity, their 9th album, released November the 21st, 1980. It's a slick pivot to Heartland pop rock, and Keep On Loving You, the lead single, dropped that same day. Written by Kevin Cronin, the song was personal, gut-wrenchingly so. Cronin has said it's about his wife's infidelity before their marriage, a wound he turned into a vow to stick it out. The lyrics are raw and conflicted. You should have seen by the look in my eyes, baby. There was something missing. You should have known by the tone of my voice, maybe, but you didn't listen. You played dead, but you never bled. Instead, you lay still in the grass, oil cooled up and hissing. That snake imagery, vivid, bitter, sets up the pre-chorus. And I meant every word I said. When I said that I love you, I meant that I love you forever. Then the chorus hits, and I'm going to keep on loving you, because it's the only thing I want to do. I don't want to sleep. I just want to keep on loving you. It's desperate, defiant and soaring, with Gary Richrath's power chords and a screaming guitar giving it muscle. Cronin initially wrote it as a straightforward love song, but the band, sceptical of its softness, turned it into a beast. Neil Doughty was worried their hard rock fans would balk, but Richrath cranked his amp to 11, and the result was a power ballad prototype. Soft verses, explosive chorus, raw emotion. Released November the 4th, 1980 in the US, it climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on March the 21st, 1981, staying there for 1 week, the 500th song to top the chart. It went platinum, selling over 1 million copies in the US. In the UK, it peaked at number 7 on April the 11th, 1981, their first British hit. The album High Infidelity was a juggernaut, topping the Billboard 200 for 15 weeks, the best-selling album of 81, and eventually going 10 times platinum. The video is pure early MTV cheese. Shot by Bruce Gowers, it's one of 4 low-budget clips they made in a day, with Cronin as a patient spilling his guts to a sultry psychiatrist, think librarian glasses 80s hot. Cronin later called it dorky, but it was the 17th video played when MTV launched on August the 1st, 1981. The song's legacy endures. It's a wedding staple despite its dark verses, and has been covered by everyone from the Lemonheads to the Deftones. It's not just REO's breakthrough, it's the blueprint for every hair metal ballad that followed. The song is all about breaking the tension. The verses seethe with betrayal, but the chorus is pure devotion. Cronin's voice, nasal and raw, carries both the hurt and the hope. Richrath's guitar wails like a heartbreaking open. It's not polished like Journey or flashy like Van Halen. It's Midwest stubbornness, refusing to let go. And that's REO Speedwagon in 81, a band that slogged for a decade, but everything on a ballad, and won. So, we are now halfway through playlist 22, but what do we have on the latter half coming up next week? Well, it's a pick and mix bag, that's for sure. We've got the longest running girl rock band, Girls' School. We're getting lost in pure cheese heaven, or hell, with Barry Manilow. We have one of the soppiest instrumentals, which everyone who experienced the 80s will know. We get dark with Bauhaus. We finally get a Level 42 tune showing their later chops. And we end drowning in some ska with The Beat. As always, if you can give us a follow or a review, that would be lovely. But until next time, have a good week. Take care.